I was talking to the guy Zakaria, L'chaim OG, and yeah, I was just talking. Yesterday we just like had a brief conversation, and it was we talked about just like the whole metaphysical dynamic. You know what I mean? Like just the whole dynamic of like meaning that that acceptance that there's this physical world, and then there's another dynamic around us, right? And like say for example, like if a person has like a lot of jewelry on, right? And they go to an area that they would say it's a bad area, right? Whatever. Which means is like there's a lack of economics there, right? And so because of that, there's some people who have resorted to, thievery, robbery, these types of things, right? So you would tell a guy who, you would tell a guy who, had a lot of jewelry on. You say, hey, it's probably not a good idea to go to that neighborhood, right? So what we're talking about, just like in brief, what we're talking about is this idea of like different levels of protection and different levels of challenges, right? And like a lot of what we've been learning about is like this physical world and this non-physical world, and like how they're like intricately connected together. And we talk about the idea of the connection to the life force of the creator, and the whole process, the whole thing. But I'm also bringing that idea of the challenges that we have also exist in those two realities as well. Like there's physical challenges, and then there's say non-physical challenges. What I mean by non-physical challenges, meaning that there's challenges that manifest in your life specifically to test you, right? Like specifically like to test you, to like you know to build a vessel, to see if the vessel's there, to see if you're ready, all these different types of things. So you have those challenges as well, right? Like the video game, right? You get to the end of the level, and you battle the king of that level, right? So everyone has that challenge, right? And that's why we have so much kavod for Abraham, Abraham Avinu, because he had all those tests in his life and he passed every single one of them, right? Which is like a big idea, like does that mean he completed his tikkun, the whole thing, right? So anyway, so with that being said, so we think about like a lot of these guys, like these younger guys, they in the NBA, they're in the NFL, or whatever, these league, that league. This guy has a few songs on the radio. They're in a situation where they get an inflection of cash, right? And that cash dealt with a certain way could like really propel, generations after them, right? And for sure, their own descendants, right? But at the same time, there's, obviously the challenges that any, growing business would have, or any business that has like a, inflection of cash, right? And then you have, the other non-physical components, which are the scenarios, which are the people, and all the things that come at you, testing you in different ways, providing certain things to you, right? And if you're not prepared, for that, you just, you won't be able to rationalize and say like, oh well, this is just a test, right? If you grow up, maybe you had a dad, an uncle, or a coach, or someone who kind of, had that type of wisdom and gave it to you, right? But if you didn't have that, you're kind of out there in anything that comes at you. So you see, like, a lot of these guys, you see they have these humongous problems with women, and now the whole thing now is like, these girls, they meet these guys, and they have some type of relational dynamic with them, and if something goes wrong, you know they make accusations. It could be very true, very not true. I'm just saying the scenario. I'm just saying the scenario, and they're suing these guys for millions of dollars, and it's like a thing. You know what I mean? It's not like it's just one person. It's there, and it's like specific law firms that are like specializing in this, right? So the point is to saying, instead of that way of thinking, right? Instead of that way of thinking, it's instead of that way of thinking, if that athlete or that business leader, right, understood that, then they would have a whole different set of lenses, right? So the point is the saying, when we think about like leaders in the past in America, from all backgrounds, how much were they aware of these non-physical challenges? Right? Maybe some of them were. They were like maybe in secret societies, they were learning Kabbalah, who knows, right? I don't know. But I'm saying, how many of them were aware of these non-physical challenges and how Hashem is going to manifest, certain obstacles, certain challenges, in our lives for our correction. Like, he's not against us, but it's a correction. What do you think he's against Avraham Avinu when he says, "Take your son to, Har Maria"? You know what I mean? Like, come on, like he loved Abraham like so much, like meaning not love in the way that, like, you know what I mean, but it's that aspect of giving and receiving, right? And so it's just something to think about, because a lot of times, we, like, in our society, it's such a focus on noble men and statesmanhood. Even they don't say it in that same way. I mean, they used to a long time ago, but they don't say it as much anymore. But like great men, great orators, great speakers, this type of thing, right? And so it's kind of like we have these like libraries, and we have these statues, and we have books, like really like books with like a lot of dust, you know, a lot of dust, which means they've existed for a long time. And they talk about these people, and they say like, "Wait, look how long ago it was written." I mean, you have to revere it. I mean, it was written like 200 years. You know what I mean? It's like it's like it's Torah or something, right? God forbid. But the point is, just saying that, like, so I grew up in that society, and I'm like, well, they propped up all these different men and forefathers, and the forefathers, it sounds a little bit like, I don't know, like, so I don't know, it sounds like the Avos, I don't know, but the point is just saying, like, so they have all these things that they propped up, and you know and then so I'm like reconciling that, and I'm like, well, where were they at in these other subjects? Like, where were they at in terms of like the world around them, the world internal, the purpose of man? Like, did they share that information? Do they know it for themselves? Is it coded? Maybe, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, I just have to ask that question. And I'm talking about all. See, like, the thing is, in the past, and it's a correction point. In the past, someone like myself, right, will come along and like question things, right? They have new information, they come and question, right? But they always focus on black people. You know what I mean? Right? Because I'm black, I got to critique. So let me question this black leader. No, I'm questioning all the leaders: the white ones, Hispanic ones, Italian ones, the Irish ones, all of them. Like, where were they at in this frame of thinking? Because their whole academia, their whole system of thought is devoid of spiritual essence. So it's like all of them, like their ideas or concepts, like how relative are they to the future of the world? Because I think about, there's been a lot of societies that have existed, over the last like 4,000 years, right? 5,000 years. I mean, there's been a lot of societies, right? And some societies have been like extremely, like the whole Atlantis, all this type of stuff. I mean, maybe it's true. I don't know. But I'm saying, but they talk about societies that were very highly elevated. We don't know any of their information today. And if we do, it's very concealed, right? So I'm just saying, so there's a lot of ideas that exist in America. There's a lot of ideas that exist in the West. And I'm saying, as it relates to the purpose of creation, how relevant are they? Because it's like you go to college, right? You go to college and you go to class and you have a professor, and the professor is teaching you, a curriculum, an outlook, right? A set of information, a subject matter, right? He's teaching you that, and then you hear that, and you do additional reading around it, and you write a response, right? And you're generally critiqued on how well you are able to respond, But so I'm just saying, so I hear that, but it's just like, does it make those people actually great, right? Does it make them great because they have a school and they have a teacher teaching it and they're emphasizing it and they're talking about the wonders of it? But if I can't connect it to the purpose of creation, I'm just kind of like, I'm trying to figure it out. That's all I'm saying. I just because like you see these things like you say like John F. Kennedy's like don't like say not what your country could do for you, but what you can do for your country. And everyone's like, oh my God, wow, and God bless John F. Kennedy and his family. Everything. I'm not taking away from it, but I got to critique, right? And I'm just saying. So we hear these things and we hear these different quotes and these different things and we're like, wow, or like even when they look at the constitutional papers, like we saw with the church and state, right? Like they go into that Thomas Jefferson's, whoever it was, like old letters, and then they take it out, and it's just like, but why are they at a level? Okay, I get it. Like America's very successful, has a very successful model. I get it. I'm with it, right? However, when we think about an era of America going into space, right? And like I'm just saying, I'm just talking about expanded reality, right? I'm just saying from that perspective, are we allowed to detach and say like, hey, you know what? That way of thinking was for one era, and now we have to go into a new era. But we can still always connect and go back and see those original principles and these types of things. But it's like, we have to go into a new era of thought, right? And I think that's like really what we should be pushing, right? Like it's not like equality, this, black and this reparation. It's just like no, the whole system of thought in the West, has to advance, right? It has to evolve past this whole color scheme. It has to evolve past, any form of physical war, right? In that frame of dominance, yes, we could cohorse and engage as Americans, right? And expand, our economic prowess. It doesn't have to happen through war, right? So I'm just saying, so it's a new way of thinking, and what we're, it's not like I'm saying like, oh, I have some new way of thinking. I'm saying no, it's a real thing. It's like either you believe that the soul exists in a human being, and therefore the soul is the base center of reality, or these human beings come alive and maybe they have some aspect of some divine spark in them. Maybe they do. I don't know how they understand it, but either way, it grows, right? It grows based off of what you do in the world. It grows based off of your accomplishment. This is not my matrix. This is the matrix that every single person lives with. I went to public school like everyone else. That system of public school is based off of that. It's not based off of you, the eccentric, the soul, and the human being is unique and autonomous to itself. That's not their philosophical approach. Their philosophical approach is one size is for all, right? Which means it's a factory, and out of those collective, there'll be some that rise above, and those will be the ones that we celebrate, and we'll use those individuals to inspire the masses. This is their idea. We're going to take a few guys out of each neighborhood that could play basketball really good, and we're going to put them in a league, and we're going to give them a lot of money, and everyone in that community or communities like that are going to see that and they're going to have hope. And they're going to say, hey, I don't have to have despair. I could go and pick up a basketball and make $100 million. All I gotta do is practice really hard. And that concept in itself is enough to control civil unrest, right? A group of people feel like, oh man, we're against the wall. We don't have anything. Lottery, all these types of things, right? So I wanna learn this safer. Okay, it's Derek Hashem. It's a rom call, right? Now the thing is, I've been learning rom call for some months now with Otinel on Path of the Just, Miss Shalat Yisharim, right? So this is Derek Hashem, right? The Way of God. And so in this first part, that's what I'm saying. I'm not sure if I want to learn the Sefer fully because I just like, I don't want my brain to become like a Ramchal brain. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing, like, because I'm so into his way of thinking, right? When I'm learning the Sefer, I'm also learning his way of thinking, right? And so I'm like, God, like, God, if I read this next Sefer, it's kind of like, you know what I mean? Anyway, anyway, his first part of his chapter deals with the Creator, right? The first chapter deals with the concept of the creator, and it deals with the different structures of the creator. You know what I mean? When I say structures, like our perceptions as human beings, right? And that's something. If I want to really learn the Sefer with you, I would do justice and read the introduction, and really go through it, right? So I'm not sure if I'm there yet, right? I'm just like you can't, you gotta be careful with the learning. You gotta pace yourself. You can't. We'll figure it out. It's like, but anyways, with that being said, so it kind of deals with the perspective. Now, the thing is, why is that significant for what we're talking about? It's significant because part of that transformation that we're speaking about in that new frame of reality, right? Like this new like vision of society and where society can go. The root of that idea is it's a very interesting point, right? I grew up, in Islam, right? I talk about all the time. It's world famous, world famous. It's going to get even more too, right? And so I talk about that, right? Now, but there's a really big difference in the way that Muslims understand God and the way that Jews understand God, right? Or how we understand in Judaism versus how we understand in Islam. So what's interesting is like you hear Muslims say, you hear them say, yeah, I probably said this before, right? Because it's big enough. They'll say Allahu Akbar, right? God is great, right? So it means Arabic, right? And so it's this idea like this, the greatness of God and his majesty and this and his exaltedness and this whole thing, right? And it's kind of like the relationship between God and the physical world, is somewhat not so articulated, meaning that like it's the greatness of God and the power of God and the creator and how God is the creator of this whole thing. And you really don't understand that point until you understand the Jewish perspective, which is Hashem Echad, right? God is one. Right. So what does that mean that God is one? It means that every single thing is an expression of God. Like everything that exists, everything in the physical world is an expression of one of the four kingdoms. Right. And that aspect is that not only is it an expression of God, it has its own intelligence, it has its own tikkunim, right? In the same way that I do, at its own level. Right. And so that's the Torah's understanding of it. That everything is totally connected. It's just that, and it's interesting. You'll think that like that would be an obvious point, right? You see that you'll say like you'll say like that's an obvious point. Like I mean, like you think like a person who's a Muslim, you go to them and you say like, hey, you know what? You explain that concept. I'm talking about people who are like scholarly. I'm not saying like just someone who could just say whatever. I'm talking about scholarly. I've had this conversation with Muslim scholars. And they say that's ridiculous because now you're saying that, like you're saying, like, well, if some person has a toilet and an outfit, that's also an expression of the creator. And it's like, yeah, no, that's filthy, it's dirty, it can't be. It was like, what do you mean? Who you think makes it? It's the creator makes it. You know what I mean? maybe there's different opinions. I'm not saying I went on some like World Quest survey and whatever, but I have, mostly through social media and like some of these like circles where they have like, their classes ask these questions. But the point is just saying that idea, right? And so like this idea where we want to get to is this idea of Hashem Echad, right? Because even in Christianity, it's still like, I mean, the JC thing is just crazy, right? But the point is saying like even with that, it's still not Hashem Echad. You know what I mean? Per se. You know what I mean? Like, and the whole thing's wild. But the point is just saying that idea of tikkunim, that idea of interconnectedness, that idea of the greatness, right? We want to understand the great. We want to know that Hashem is in every aspect. Hashem is all around us all the time. We're seeing Hashem. And okay, so let's go and read the text. Hold on. So yeah, so that's where we're at. That's the point. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Okay, so here's the Ramchal, and famous Kabbalist. Okay, so here's his book, Derek Hashem. For world famous Sefer. World famous Sefer. I'm telling you, this book, Mishalat Yisharim, changed me so much. I am not the same person I was when I first started that Sefer. And I am not the same person that I started with that Sefer. And so it's just like, oh my goodness, I can't imagine this Derek Hashem and like where he takes it and the way he breaks it down. It's just like, oh wow, 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 wow. Okay, Mitziot. Okay, so he says, okay. So it says, Kol ish me Israel sarika le amen. Sorry, Shea amen ve yadat sheish Shem. Okay. All right. So he says the existence of God, right? And again, if I wanted to, I'm not doing full justice because I'll read the introduction and we'll see why he's forming it this way, the whole thing. So I'm not doing justice, but I just want to focus on a couple points. So he says, every person of Israel must believe and know that there is one pre-existing, eternal, first being, and he brought forth into being and beings into beings in everything that exists, and that it is God, may he be blessed. Okay, so that was like really intricate, right? Okay, so he says, so every Jew, right, every person of Israel, right, he says he has to know that there is a pre-existing, okay, so pre-existing, eternal first being. So the question is he talking about Adam or is he talking about the creator? And he says, and he brought into being and brings into being everything that exists. Okay, all right. So it's a pre-existing eternal, okay, is the entity that exists, and he brought into being beings and in beings and everything that exists. Okay, that's kind of like interesting way to say it. Okay, fine. Od Sari Kashe Da'ad She Chamitzavi. How's that? Yeah. So he says like this. So he says his perfection. He said one must also know. So I guess these are the things that a person has to start with understanding about the creator. So number one, that the creator is the beginning. It's the essence. It's everything that exists comes from this creator, and everything that comes into reality is a byproduct of the creator. That's his first point. And I'm summing it up. He said one. He said in that first part he titles it the existence of God. So this is his perfection. One must also know that the true understanding of this being, may his name be blessed, is not grasped at all by anyone besides him. And he says, and we only know this, we know this about him, that he is perfect, being in every type of perfection, and there is no deficiency in him at all. He says, however, we have known these things by tradition from the forefathers and from the prophets, and all of Israel grasped them at the stand of Mount Sinai, clearly understood the truth and taught them to their children, generation after generation, until this. I mean, until another, and he says, generation after generation, another until this day. He says, and Moshe commanded them in the words of the Almighty. He says in Deuteronomy, lest you forget the things that you saw with your eyes, and you shall make them known to your children and your children's children. He says, however, all of these matters are even validated by way of the investigation of proof that the proof that can be studied. And it is necessary for them to be so blessed on what exists and on that which can be comprehended from them. He says, which we see with our eyes. Accordingly, disciplines such as science, geometry, astronomy, and other disciplines from which you can take true basis from which the clarity of these true matters is derived. Okay, that's a little complicated, intricate too. Okay, so he starts off this conversation by talking about the perfection and how there is no deficiencies in Hashem. Hashem is not like anything that exists. His perfection is beyond our logic, and only he can understand his totality. We can't even understand this, right? And he said, and this principle and this understanding that he's saying is something that was understood by the prophets and that was but originally derived by our ancestors on Mount Sinai. And as they stood on Mount Sinai, they received this, they had total clarity to this, right? And you see Moshe even quotes this exact point, right? And so he says that, and it is necessary for them to be so based that on what exists and on what can be comprehended from it. Okay, and it is necessary for them to be so based on what exists and on that which can be comprehended from them. Okay, so these are two things, something that exists and something that can be comprehended. It's just which we can see with our eyes accordingly to the disciplines. Okay, so I think what he's saying is saying that there's two different aspects, right? There's what's around us and what could be comprehended. And so I guess what he's saying here is that there's disciplines that exist that allow us to comprehend aspects, I guess, of measurement, of time or space or these types of things, right? And he says other disciplines from which we could take true basis from, which the clarity of these true matters is derived. He says, we will not write at length about this now. Rather, we will present the base for their truth and arrange the things clearly according to the tradition that is in our hands and well known to our nation. Okay, so we're going to keep going. He says, "Od Sari Sheyada Shey HaMitzvah." He said, "It is necessary." He says, okay, so that was around the perfection, right? And over here, what he's saying about perfection is saying that, and I'm going to go outside of the text to try to explain it. So the way that I understood it is that what he's saying is saying that God is everything, God is everywhere, right? And the basis of the Torah is allow us to kind of like comprehend aspects of that, right? Like, like the creator's will, the creator's love, the creator's this, and because it's already happening around us. We just all of a sudden we read this, we learn this, and we turn around, we're like, aha, wow, okay, now I get it, right? Oh yeah, wow, I can see it now, right? And so I guess he's comparing that to other forms of disciplines that give us other kind of like abilities to see systems around us, right? And so that's why I get what he's trying to. So he's go to this next section, and he says the necessity of his existence. He says one must also know that the existence of this being, may his name be blessed, is necessary, is a necessary existence the absence of which is completely impossible. So he's touching on this idea of like saying that the creator itself is like the basis of what we see. It's not like this is the creator. You know what I mean? It's not like a slideshow. You know what I'm saying? Like this is dynamic. So he says, "Oh, Sarik Da'at." So he says in his being independent of others. He says, one must know that his existence, but maybe blessed to be he, is not dependent at all on anything besides him. Rather, his existence is independent. Is rather his existence is independently necessary. So the aspect of the creator is just like it's a complete entity in itself. There's no partners. There's no this. It's one entity that's completely separate from everything. He says, "Vekin tzarik sheda ade v'mitzvotenu mitzvotod yod mitzvotod pari parashut libi havaracha." So he said, "It's simplicity." He says, "And likewise, it must be known that its existence must be blessed, and it is simple." Just undifferentiated existence without compensation or municipality at all. And all of the perfections are found within him in a simple way. The He said that the explanation of this is as follows: many different capacities are found within the soul, each one of which has its own domain. By way of example, memory is one capacity, willpower is another capacity, and imagination is another capacity. And not one of these enter the domain of its fellowship at all. He says, as surely the domain of memory is a domain, and the domain of willpower is another domain. And the domain of willpower does not enter the domain of memory, nor does the memory enter the domain of willpower. He says, so too with all of them. However, the master, maybe blessed be he, does not have different capabilities, even though he actually has properties that are are differing from us. So he's making a big point. He's saying like he's explaining like the design of the human being, right? And he says like he says we have this kind of like domain of memory, right? Where that's like an aspect of our existence is memory. And then we have another aspect of our existence, which is willpower. And then we have another aspect of imagination, right? And other capabilities, right? And he's saying that the domain of memory and the domain of willpower, they don't cross each other. Willpower and memory is two different things, right? And he says and they're separate things. And in imagination, I guess it could be memory kind of, but it's different. It's a different component to it, right? And so he's saying here that in that way that we exist, he says the creator is totally opposite. There's no different departments, there's no different capacities, everything is one fluid entity that's beyond. And he says that there's properties, right? He says that however the master, maybe his name be blessed, does not have different capacities, even though he actually has properties that are differing within us. Okay, so that's like a deep idea, right? So he doesn't have these things, but however, we who do he still dwells within us. He says, for surely he's willful and wise and is powerful, and he is perfect in every perfection. However, the truth of his existence is one matter that includes within his truth in domain, meaning the truth of his being is having a domain is not accessible, is not applicable to him. May his name be blessed, but rather it is only by way of literary license. So when we talk about these different aspects of capacity of God and the attributes of God, that's our way of being able to, because we have this differentiation within us. And when we connect to the creator, we have to have that in mind. He's saying that's the way that they wrote, but it does not mean in any way that this is the creator itself. And he says it comes out that he has all of the perfection, not as an addition to his existence and the truth of his being, but rather the angel of his truth, of his being itself, which includes in its truth all of the perfection in its truth, as it would be impossible for the truth of being without all of its perfection. So he's saying he's a little rhythmic in this. He's freestyling, right? But the thing is, so over here in this point, he's talking about this idea of the perfection of the creator, right? And the essence of the perfection of the creator is that he says not as an addition to this essence and the truth of his being, but rather the angle of truth of his being itself, which includes its truth and all of the perfections of the truth, as it would be impossible for this type of being without all of its perfection from the angles of itself, right? And he says in this approach is very far from our comprehension and our perception. He says, and it is almost as if we have no way to um, um, we have no way to kind of like explain it. We have no way to kind of articulate it, or indulge in it. Like it's beyond our logic. Like the perfection of the creator and his capacity. For our perceptions and imaginations are only grasping things limited by their nature, which is created by him. May he be blessed. He says, as his perfection is that our senses perceive and bring to the mind. And he says, with the creatures, these capabilities are surely many and differing matters. However, we have already prefaced the truth of his existence. May it be blessed. Is it not grasped, and it is not and cannot be compared to that what we see with creatures, for their properties and their existence are not at all the same. The such we can learn from one another. However, this is also from the things that we know through tradition. He says, but they are validated by investigation through nature itself, with its atoms and its properties, and for it is impossible that there's nevertheless not exists a being removed from all of nature, atoms in its limitations, from all the lack and deficiencies, from all the multiplicity in the. Okay, so I'm gonna start saying a little bit outside, so I feel like I'm reading too much. Okay, so it's a lot of words. It's a lot of words. It's a lot of words. Okay. We're able to see differentiation, right? We're able to see differentiation in physical structures. We're able to see differentiation in creatures and insects and plants, animals, everything, even other humans, right? And so one could assume that because all these differentiations exist in creation, that they also exist inside of the creator, right? And he says, for this it is impossible that nevertheless not to exist a being removed from all nature, atoms, and limits, from all the lack and deficiencies, from all the multiplicity and composition, from all relationships and value, from contingency of creatures. Okay. To be the ultimate cause for existence and for all that develops from it. Without the existence, those things we see existing and their continuation would be impossible. Okay, so that was like very like that was choppy. That was choppy. I'm just being honest. That was very choppy. So okay, let's try to figure this out. All right, let's just try to figure this out. Hashem is perfect, right? There's no different departments. Creation has these different departments, has these different capacities to show us the endless multiplicity of Hashem's light being revealed, right? So we have all the different vessels, we have all the different, connection points, all these different things, to um, that exist around us, and all those things are showing us this absolute perfection of the Creator, right? So, like when you see a turtle, for example, right? I know it's random, but when you see a turtle, that there's that turtle represents a specific type of a vessel, and the light force that's in it brings it life, right? But that vessel that we call turtle, right, is receiving light from the creator, and once the light from the creator stops, that turtle cease to exist. And the same thing with the frog, right? The same thing with the tadpole, the same thing with the bird, right? The same thing with the trees, the same thing with the water, right? So the point is saying, so this is the reality that we're in, right? And so the world around us, we're seeing the perfection and the multiplicity and the dynamic aspect of this all-encompassing creator. And we're able to see it through that, right? But some people could see it the other way, right? They could see it as this dynamic of oh, okay, well, the creator's here. You can see how people in ancient times could come up with like multiple gods, or wanting God to be physical, and all these things, because it's like, this is the world that we live in, right? And you're trying to rationalize what is and what isn't, right? So it says Umi Masarik Shayadat. He says the unity. He says it's also required for one to know that it is necessary for this being, may his name be blessed, to be one and not more. He said that the explanation of this, that it is impossible for there to be an existence of many beings and exist of which of independent necessary. He said, rather, this is necessary, the perfected existence must be only one. And he says, and if there exists another being, that only exists because he made them exist of his own will. He says, so too come out that they are all dependent on him and not existing from themselves. So he says Nimsa Kalal he says Hiya Duot Harushiot. So he says, and he comes in the sum of the principles of root of 6. He says it comes out that the sum of these roots is a principle of 6. They are the truth of his existence, may he be blessed, his perfection, the necessity of his existence, his being independent of anything besides himself, his simplicity and his unity. Anyways, it's something to review. This is the first time I kind of like, went through it type of a thing, but I mean, I did go through it a little bit. I went through it. But I'm just saying, but it's something like, he is what we call this hashkafa, right? Which is outlook, right? So like, how do we see the creator? Right? Like, how do we see the creator? Okay, we know that the creator is there. We're the creator, the Insof. We get it, the endless world, the whole thing. We get it. But in terms of the tradition, what is the tradition of how we understand this concept of God and concept of the creator? And so that's what we just learned with the Ramchal. And there's different writers who've written on this topic, obviously, right? But the Ramchal is obviously one of the legends, one of the all-time greats. So it always is good to learn from them. Any points, response, comments, thoughts?
Yeah, shalom. Yeah, I believe that um, I think that this is very important for us to understand because, as, just kind of thinking about the different capacities. As you were talking about them, as you was reading about them, imagination, willpower, memory. It just brings me to a place of thinking of like storage units, and through those storage units, we it's going back to the same thing about vessels. So are we to look at those storage units as ways of perceiving the creator, as far as in, like, let's just use imagination, for example. Okay. So if we saying like let's say Ezekiel, he sees a vision. Okay. Now he sees it with his eyes. And so he has to use his imagination in order to describe describe what he just saw, right? And so in terms that's relatable to mankind. So it's kind of like your book, right? You perceived and you read and you understood Judaism, but you understood it through your perception. And so you made it relatable first to yourself, and then you use your imagination to be able to talk about quantum physics and so forth to express your experience to Judaism, to your relationship with the Creator. So are we to look at those? What I'm interested in is that how do we look at like willpower? Do we look at that as the place of restraint, to whereas we're saying, hey, listen, it's my will to do His will, and so I eat kosher because that's His will. I give a blessing because that's His will. And so, in other words, it's me taking those capacities, those storage units, and choosing how to receive the Creator and store up that information and manifest it back out into the world. Is that how we should be looking at it?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think I definitely think that's definitely like the path, right? And I would say like because you guys have a lot of children. I would say that maybe a way to look at it is like this. It's like what Ramchal is going into is basically this idea of like unity through the perception of diversity, right? So like meaning that so like you have like you have the kaleidoscope, right? And so like like you have like a central light, right? But based off of how this kaleidoscope turns, it refracts a different aspect of that light expresses itself differently, right? So if it's like more on the green side, it's more of a green frame. If it's more yellow, it's more yellow, more blue, whatever. But the point is that, or like say for example, you have kids and kids love like these popsicles, right? And sometimes they have these like these things where they have these trays where it's like you pour whatever the water or the juice, whatever it is that you want to make the popsicle out of, and you put it into this tray component, and this tray component has different shapes, right? And so it comes out in these different, shapes, these different things, these different shapes, these different animals, different creatures, whatever it is, right? But it comes out in these different shapes, but it's the same water, right? Same freezer unit, right? But it's how it's expressed in that particular tray, in that particular cup. And so he's saying that is how we see creation, right? He's saying we have to see creation as seeing a series of different trays that God's light is reflecting off of, right? And his light that's reflecting off of it is what we see as a tree, right? Or we see as a bird, or we see it as a plane, or we see it as what? But all these things are expressions of God's light for us. And and that's what he's saying. So he's saying that he didn't say this point, but like you can see throughout history, that's been an issue, right? Because people have societies where they created idols, they have beliefs that there was multiple gods, and he's stressing this idea. He's saying like, no, like there could be no partners with the creator. In order for the creator to be the creator of all things, there can't be any other partners. There can't be a duality that would denote the fact of sovereign independence, right? However, the creator can create things, right? But to say so he's going over this point because he wants us to be clear on the dynamic of the functionality of the creator as it relates to us, as it relates to creation around us. So we could now have that basis and go into the next chapter, which is creation, right? And you'll see like how they link. So he's building a frame of thinking in this first chapter, right? And I'll go over it, and then we'll keep on. I think we're gonna do it. I think we're gonna do it. I don't know yet. I don't know, because it's like the thing is, once you start, you got to finish. It's not like, for me at least. Some people, they just maybe learn a few points on it, whatever. All right. So, anyways, I guess we'll end it here. Plus, I got to pray too. Any last thoughts, words, everything?
I was actually, Shalom,
Sure.
Rabbi. I was actually thinking that about how you have, just people in general, how you can have someone who is called or is disfigured or just have like some type of defect in their body, or whether it be somebody who's extremely tall, somebody who's extremely short, whatever, different things. I mean, there's different societies where people have never seen a person who is, different shades, of skin tones, and they would be probably really amazed to see that. But what I was thinking about was how even in every single variation of people, that we give a blessing. If we see someone who is like, disfigured or something we've never seen before or come in contact with, we're giving a blessing to Hashem for allowing us to see that. And we're seeing, I don't know if this is the right way to word this, but like just another, part of his express perfection in the earth. It's different, but it's perfect because he is perfect and he allowed this to manifest in the earth. And so everything that is manifest in the earth is good. So he is, because he's perfect. And it's not like, like you have someone who would believe that, okay, God forbid, that if they see someone who does not look exactly like them, they believe that, this person could have come from somewhere else, but we understand that everything is from, Hashem. And so it's perfect because he is perfect. And so that's just was my thoughts.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think that's a really good, really important point you brought out, because that base understanding
Hey,
of
Ryan,
God,
check and give you cat.
Okay, mom.
the base understanding
Yes, ma'am.
of God in that way. Hold on a second. Okay, so that base understanding of hold on, let me put it mute. All right. So that base understanding of God is so incredibly important, and that's what Rumpel's bringing out, because there's so many other principles that are connected to that, right? Like that idea that everything has to be perfect because of the mechanism of what the creator is. It has to be perfect, right? So if I'm entering the discussion of creation from that basis, then it's easy to accept the differentiation, or things that are different than us, or like even ethnicity, or these things. Now you can see like the damage of these certain beliefs about what God is, because these beliefs about God and making him into an idol, and the JC stuff, all this type of stuff, you can see how, because of that lack of understanding of the creator, how that can lead into the thinking that built the society that persecuted our ancestors. You see what I'm saying? It's from these distorted ways of understanding the creator and what the creator is, let alone going into the passages and all these other things, right? But just let alone that, but just the base idea of like, what is God? What is the creator? What is this functionality? That aspect that we just grasped from this point. If people accepted that God is perfect, and God, and we're going to learn about creations, tomorrow, whatever, but that idea of creation, right? Or that idea of the concept of creation that comes out of that, like, how could you want to kill it? How could you want to see it as different? Then you're saying there's good and bad within God, right? The whole system breaks down. So anyway, so yeah, so that I hear that. Any other reflections?
No, I'm good. Toda.
All right, tonight. Okay, so we'll continue on tomorrow. Baruch atah